Welcome to my studio. This is going to be a short video about airplane noise. So it's a big plane, small plane. Which one is the loudest? I think we're all going to know that answer. You would expect that the smaller planes would be quieter. And in this video, that's what you're going to see. It's quieter planes and then the louder ones. I record the type of plane it is, time that the timestamp on it, elevation of the aircraft as it's passing over our clubhouse pool, and then you'll see underneath that the speed, the dB level, so the sound pressure level. Can I get that recording? And then in the background, you'll be able to hear voices that are talking. And the main thing for the voice over in the background is that so that we have some sort of a comparison of what is it, interruption of speech at what level. So usually anything below 60 dB doesn't really interrupt somebody's conversation. You start getting above 60, you get into 70. 70 pretty much will stop a conversation. So 70 dB is loud enough to have a conversation stop, unless the people want to speak over it, and then it's got to be quite a bit louder. So you're literally going to be screaming at some point at 75 dB. That's pretty intense. And so, but in this video, you'll hear that the conversation stops at 60. So, I think when we hit 65 dB, the conversations are over with. So it's 70 for sure. Anyway, so that's what you'll find in here. So let's watch the video, and then we could discuss it afterwards. If you stay with me, we'll talk about what we're hearing and what are some of the parameters that are affecting that.
Okay. So see, this is the second gathering of materials.
And you're trying to fill the half empty?
That was an epic fail.
Oh, what is my neighbor? I was in a chili cook-off recently, and I only got one.
Another spell that then they spray up and the water goes away so fast, and then your thing goes dry.
Right.
So even with the pot that I put out there, I filled it full of water and I put it.
When you like
Uh-huh.
Oh, you got his towel.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
It's all right.
May I use your
This
towel?
is his towel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where is it?
This is his towel.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, whatever.
Bag. It's got
Okay, wow. Do you like it? another airplane video with noise. And I'm not complaining, so it's not a complaining video. It's just I'm just documenting what it sounds like to stand at the pool and listen to planes fly over. And I guess maybe somebody told me that if you look at the plane, it'll sound louder. So I tend to start looking up all the time to see the planes fly by, so I notice them more. And whereas some of the people, like my friend Dan, he'll say, why even bothering with that? They're not that loud. And so I don't know if it's because he's lost his hearing or maybe he's just not bothered by the planes flying over, but he doesn't notice them being very loud. So the smaller planes, they don't make enough noise to actually cause a conversation interference. But as we got into the jets, jet aircraft are over 70 dB, they all stop conversations. So you can talk over it, or if there's a lot of people together in a gathering, the volume of the conversation is raised. But during a normal conversation with 2 or 3 people, and an aircraft flies over, most of the time everyone just stops talking, waits for the aircraft to go by, and that's it. So, it's not ear shattering noise. That's a little bit annoying, but mostly what I'm doing here is just documenting the different levels of noise, different types, what it sounds like at our pool. I'm doing this just to collect data. So I'm data collecting. I'm collecting the sound signatures of planes, the profile of the plane as it flies over. In here you'll see the altitude that it flies over, and that's from sea level. So we're at about 650 feet in our neighborhood. So the planes are quite close. Something that's going to be 1,400 feet is pretty standard for being on the glide slope. It's going to be probably about 700 to 750 feet above the ground. So they are a lot closer than you would see in a normal situation. And it's because we're in the landing path. So what we show in here is that when the planes are at higher altitudes, they're of course quieter. And the smaller planes tend to be even quieter even at the lower altitudes. I think maybe we had one that was 65 dB. Larger planes, we get anywhere from 40 to 60 of those a day that fly through. The biggest one so far has been in Bar 175 that they operate. And in the wintertime, that one was pretty loud, but it seems to be not as loud as it used to be. So maybe they're flying a different configuration or something. So I have to kind of look into that a little bit. About a year and a half ago, they started bringing in larger planes, so an airliner. I don't think it's quite an airliner. They're 30-seat limit capacity. So I believe they're still called charter jets. At 30 seats, they're flying this Embaro 145, which is actually a 45-seat plane. They just fly it with 30 seats in it. So that aircraft is quite large, makes a lot of noise. Whereas the smaller ones tend to make less noise. And then you still have planes that'll fly like turboprops. They're pretty loud. There's a PC-12 that comes through. That's as loud as a jet. And we have one that's got 2 engines in the back. They're pushers. That one has a kind of a unique sound because it's high frequency, and there's 2 of them. It's quite loud. It's the loudest plane I've ever heard through here. Fortunately, we don't see it too often. The one time that I did record it a couple times, it was a weekend where there was 3 different planes that came from 3 different owners, from 3 different locations. There's no way that these were all connected. So it's just coincidental that we happened to get 3 of them at the same time. But it appeared to be at the beginning that it was just one plane. It was quite loud. And it was like, okay, was this guy going to keep coming back, or what's happening here? So, and maybe it's come through once or twice since then, but not that big of a deal, So it's just that it's very loud. And there's absolutely nothing that we can really do about it other than they could adjust some of the flight paths that come through our area to put them more in the industrial park instead of over the populated residential communities. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to get awareness of, just to have anything that comes in from the coast make a tighter turn into the airport. And it isn't like it doesn't happen. They're able to do it. We've seen jets come in and they'll make that landing. And it's perfectly along the industrial area. Flies over a highway, so it's not really bothering people as much. And then it flies that way anyway, so it's not like it's not going to go that direction. What they do now is they fly them out to Valley Center, which is about an extra 10-mile loop that they'll have to come around. So the airplane will fly all the way out to Valley Center, past the I-15 freeway, and then it'll make a U-turn and come back. And then that's where it catches the ILS. So there's an instrument landing system link, that they hit, and then they can land from there, or there's a couple RNAV charts that they can follow and do that landing that way. They'll send them the same direction. So what it ends up doing is it compresses the amount of aircraft that we get over us, where if you look at charts from 2005, most of the air traffic was west of us that would have came from that direction. So either from the south or the north, anywhere that came in. So it had to be something that had to do with the Metroplex. So they got Metroplex that's flying along the coast. The airplanes are a certain altitude. And then what they did was when they built their RNAV charts, they linked them with the Metroplex, which was at a higher altitude, I think, and what planes are able to fly. So we want to work on it a little bit and see if we can get that down to where maybe we got one route that comes in as preferred instead of the the recommended. So it's recommended for noise abatement procedures to fly the ILS. It says in the voluntary noise abatement procedures for the Palomar Airport that all jets should fly the ILS. So that pretty much puts them right over our heads, no matter what. So I don't know if that's making it quiet somewhere else or what's the deal here, but we do have an industrial park and it's pretty large and it's big enough for these guys to be in the landing zone and they're 3 miles out from the airport and still make that runway. You know, there's certainly any reason why we couldn't have some of these planes moved out of the way. So that's one. They've also been trying to raise the glide slope level so that the angle's a little bit steeper. The problem there is the runway's too short. So we've got a short runway, and it's already too short for some of the planes that are landing. They just happen to be able to configure the plane in such a way not as much fuel, and they'll fly with full flaps. So that probably increases the volume of the sound pressure levels that we're hearing. And I think I haven't really studied it in detail, but I think based on some stuff that I've seen with planes that are flying into San Diego International Airport, same size plane, same distance away from the ground where the sensors are at. Ours here have a 3 dB increase. So the only thing I can attribute that to is running full flaps so that they're getting the lift on the plane. They probably have to come in at a lower speed. You know, who knows? I'm not really sure. I'm not a pilot. I mean, a pilot probably knows all that stuff. But, and again, I'm not trying to demonize the airplanes or anything. I know people enjoy taking these flights to Phoenix, you know, and being able to link with another airplane somewhere else so they get on the East Coast. And I guess that's a great advantage to be able to go to the airport here in Carlsbad and be able to link onto a big airline. And they plan on adding a flight to LAX, maybe to Northern California somewhere. So, you know, they'll have some extra flights, but that's going to mean more of these planes. So we'll have more of the regional jets coming in, which are the loudest. And until they do something about the runway length, we're just going to get a pretty loud SLP from them. Hopefully, some of these things could be resolved. Another issue that I kind of foresee as a problem, and it dates back to 1978. They originally were supposed to put 2 runways in. One short one for the practicing general aviation aircraft, which is quite frequent here in Palomar. There's often 20 planes up in the air. They're probably training pilots or low-hour pilots that need to practice. And then we also get pilots from other airports that'll come here and just use our runway for practice, do touch and goes. And so it increases quite a bit of this training traffic. And then you throw in a regional jet airliner that's got 75 people on board that's going to land at that airport on one runway. You know, it could be a little bit of a conflict at sometimes when it's really busy. And I've already seen where the airplanes are doing go-around maneuver. And then there was another jet coming from the other direction that was ordered to just stay in the sky. And it was just circling around everywhere over the airport for half an hour. So that one stayed in the air for half an hour. The go around maybe took about 15 minutes to go around a circle. And you know, I get it. The airport was busy. They might have had a flat tire on one of the airplanes on the ground. You know, somebody mentioned that in the air traffic control audio. You could hear it that it's busy. You know, the guy said, "Hey, it's busy today. We don't know when it's going to get relieved. You're just going to have to go around." So that one plane stayed up in the air for about half an hour. I think it might have been a C-25B, one of the Cessnas. So basically what you're going to see here, and if you're a pilot, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, all right, you know, planes make noise, and the federal government owns the airways, and pilots have rights, and you know, that's all fine, okay. I don't have any argument with that. I don't have any argument with the planes using the airport. You know, that's what it's designed for, it's an airport, you know, that's what they do. But when they're starting to increase the traffic and they don't want to do anything to mitigate the issues of that, it doesn't feel like that's a fair solution. So, you know, they need to look at stuff and try to figure out something. Let's improve the efficiency. You know, instead of taking an airplane an extra 10 miles or whatever, 10 nautical miles out to the valley center, how about shortening that up and save that 10 miles so we don't have the plane flying over all these residential areas. It's heavily populated through here where these planes are flying, so they wouldn't have that. And maybe it decreases the overall traffic over us by, say, 25%. But hey, you know what? That 25% could go a long ways to adding more regional jets if they do that and wouldn't get as many complaints. And then maybe doing something about the airport so that we're not having to have this really deep traffic pattern. We're 4 miles out from the airport and they're coming around doing their traffic pattern for touch and go landings because the airport's so busy. So maybe if they had 2 runways there, that might help stuff. So that could be a possible solution. I don't know that it'll happen. It's a lot of money, especially when the runway's built on a landfill, and that's an issue, and I guess that's very expensive to try to correct that. And they're asking the federal government for money, and you can see how the federal government is treating any of the transportation projects in California. For example, the train, the high-speed train, that's not going to get funded. So this could be that maybe this airport thing, the expansion doesn't get funded, and maybe the whole regional jet thing will just go away on its own if they can't fix the runway. Figure out why the planes are different noise levels at different times. And it could have something to do with the barometric pressure. Sometimes pressure affects airplane flight. It certainly affects the altitude. That day that this was taking place, the barometric pressure was 29.9, which I think is standard. 29.9 is the optimum, so everything's set to that. And then as you get higher pressure, it'll look like the planes are lower, but they're not. So they say it's 30 inches of mercury, then they add another 100 feet to whatever the altitude is. In a case where we got 30 inches of mercury, plane will look like it's flying, say, 1,200 feet, but it's really 1,300 feet. So, and that's kind of an important number because 100 feet differential on an airplane, I mean, that's pretty significant when you think about the precision guidance systems that they're using and all these different things that are taking place that the pilots have to accommodate. If they're not at the exact altitude they need to be, then they could have some problems. Like, for instance, there was an accident here a couple months ago where the plane flew low into power lines on its approach. They had about 100 feet of separation there if they were flying at the optimum height, but obviously they dipped below that. And it was really bad weather conditions. There's a lot of pilot errors involved in it, but I still think power lines are not identified and they're too high. But that's just my opinion, so I don't know. I'm not a pilot, so I wouldn't really know what to think of that. A lot of people use that airport, though, so maybe if they could lower the power lines a little bit, it might make it safer for the airplanes to fly over. Extra 100 feet could go a long ways. Or maybe illuminate the buoys, so you can see them when you're landing and not rely on the guidance system all the time for everything. So that's just something out of the ordinary. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and play the 175 airplane going by just for comparison so you can see, oh yeah, that one's the loudest of the fleet. And we get that one twice a day right now, so from Phoenix, they'll come in 2 times a day, and they're supposed to start up one in LA and another one in Northern California. We'll probably get, say, 6 times a day. We might have those planes flying over. Hopefully they'll extend the runway enough to where the plane doesn't have to do this configuration where it's real loud. So that's something to consider. We'll have to see. I mean, it hasn't changed right now. Planning on going out and documenting some of the aircraft as they fly over in the summertime. So we can get some good sound readings from that without the wind in the background and different things that could be affecting it. And try to figure out, okay, where does that noise really come from? Is it motor noise, engine? Are the engines still spooled up enough to where they're creating the noise? Or is it just the size of the aircraft, the speed that it's traveling? Those kind of things. So I really need to get a lot of data to kind of understand that. And I'm sure that if you're an aviation person or aerospace engineer or something, you probably already know all this stuff. So nothing new for you. But for me, it's all new, and I'm just trying to study it a little bit, kind of get an understanding of what's going on. What are some of the things they could do to change it. As far as the rest of the video, there's not a whole lot more that I can say about it. If you got some comments, please leave me some comments and see what you think. And then any suggestions for how I should do some more of these, what the other people are looking for. I'd like to hear that. So if you're stayed with me this long and you're interested in that much, go ahead and leave me a like, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Is it something that I really need to pay attention to, the altitude of the planes, versus the speed, or is it the size of the plane, the size of the engine, so we start looking at horsepower, those kind of things. And I noticed too is when I was recording some of the other videos, depending on the location where I recorded at, if I went down into our RV park and I shot some video down there, well, sometimes the planes seemed like they were accelerating, like they were maybe going too low at that point, and they had to pull up a little bit. And so you'd get a lot louder sound from the plane there than you would up at the hill where the monitoring system's at. And another thing too is if you're interested in this, you could watch the web track monitor. Palomar Airport has a dedicated monitoring system for noise monitoring, and that's an area where people can file complaints and stuff. And we don't really get too many complaints from our neighborhood, so it can't really be that bad. Either it can't be that bad or the complaint system's broken. But they are adding some new microphones around the airport, so we can get some more data. So it creates some interesting perspectives, how much louder the planes are closer to the ground, while they're approaching the runway. So we can just kind of compare, okay, this plane was X dB at so much altitude, or, so many feet away from the microphone, and versus, it was at X dB, so many feet away from the microphone at this altitude as it was landing. So the one that I'm thinking about is really close to the airport. And then there's another microphone that they just got up and running in Bessie Ranch, and that one's pretty interesting. So kind of looking forward to kind of analyzing that noise data, trying to figure out some more stuff, because the complaints in Carlsbad are mostly for small planes. Whereas here, if we complain, it's going to be all about complaining about the larger planes. And you can even see the different planes in the operations menu. They can show which planes are being recorded. So if it's under 60 dB, they probably don't record it. And so you don't see any Cessnas in there at all, any of the prop planes, even though we get more prop planes than there are jets flying. So that changes throughout the day too. So it just depends on if it's sunny out, you'll see a lot of prop planes up, a lot of people practicing and stuff like that. So anyways, if you liked it, please hit the like button. If you didn't like it, consider subscribing, because I'm going to keep doing videos, and I keep upgrading my equipment, trying to get better at it. Try to deliver a little bit better video experience. And then also, besides airplanes, I do stuff for drafting. I got drafting business, so the tools I use in there, I'll write about that a little bit. Different applications that you can use to do plans, and then got stuff coming up on pulling permits. If you want to build an ADU, I'm going to do some stuff on that. Garage conversions, different things. So I'm hoping to do a little bit more. I have to have content, so that's the thing. Sometimes it's difficult to come up with the content. And I could sit here and talk about myself all day, but that's not any good. So anyways, like and subscribe. I hope you liked the video. Until next time, this is going to be RB signing off. I'll see you on the next one.